Alphonse Gabriel Capone, known to the world as Al Capone, is one of the most famous gangsters in American history. His life story is full of ups and downs, just like a Hollywood movie. Let's start from the beginning and see how this Italian-American boy became one of the most powerful criminals in history. Al Capone was born on January 17, 1899, in the Brooklyn neighborhood of New York. His parents, Gabriel Capone and Teresa Raiola, were Italian immigrants who came to America from Naples in search of a better life. Al Capone was the fourth of 9 children in the family. The Capone family lived in a small, cheap apartment in the Navy Yard section. This neighborhood was full of Italian immigrants looking for new opportunities. Al's dad was a barber, working hard to support the family. From a young age, Al Capone was different. He was smart and quick to learn, but he got bored in school and caused trouble. His teachers said he could succeed if he studied, but Al had no interest in school. He preferred to hang out on the streets with other kids and get into mischief. When Al Capone was 14, something strange happened that changed his life. One day in class, he got into a fight with his teacher. Al, who had a quick temper since childhood, lost it and hit the teacher. This got him expelled from school, and he never went back. After getting expelled, Al Capone took to the streets. He started hanging out with the local street gangs. Brooklyn at that time was full of gangs involved in criminal activities. Since Al no longer cared about school, he got drawn into these gangs. One of the most important people who influenced Al Capone during this time was Johnny Torrio. Torrio was an Italian gangster who lived in the neighborhood. He saw that Al was smart and could be useful to him, so he began teaching young Al Capone the ropes. Torrio taught Al how to succeed in the criminal world. He told him to be sharp, fearless, and always watch his back. Al Capone, eager for success and money, learned these lessons well. It was during this period that Al Capone got his famous nickname, Scarface. The story goes that one night, Al Capone went to a nightclub called the Harvard Inn. There, he noticed a beautiful girl named Lena Galluccio. Thinking he was smooth, Al approached her and asked her out, but Lena refused. Al, not used to being turned down, got angry and said something nasty to her. What Al didn't know was that Lena's brother, Frank Galluccio, was nearby. When Frank heard Al insult his sister, he went berserk. He pulled out a knife and attacked Al Capone, slashing his face 3 times, leaving deep scars. The wounds were so severe that they needed 80 stitches. After this incident, the scars on Al Capone's face remained, earning him the nickname Scarface. This nickname later became a symbol of Al Capone's power and fearsome reputation. After getting his face scarred, Al Capone got more serious about the criminal world. He started working for Frankie Yale, one of New York's well-known gangsters. Yale owned several nightclubs and gambling dens, hiring Al as a bouncer and hitman. At 18, Al Capone met an Irish girl named Mae Josephine Coughlin. They fell in love quickly and decided to get married. Around this time, Mae got pregnant and their son, Albert Francis "Sonny" Capone, was born. But family life didn't stop Al Capone from pursuing crime. He got more involved in illegal activities every day. During this period, a significant event happened that led to Al Capone leaving New York. In 1919, Johnny Torrio, the gangster who had taken Al Capone under his wing, called from Chicago. Torrio said there were many opportunities to make money in Chicago and asked Al Capone to join him there. Al Capone, looking for bigger opportunities, agreed. He moved to Chicago with his wife and child. When he arrived, he saw that Torrio was right. Chicago was a big city full of opportunities, especially for those willing to engage in illegal activities. That same year, something significant happened that made Al Capone and others richer. The U.S. government enacted prohibition, banning the sale and consumption of alcohol nationwide. But this ban didn't stop people from drinking. On the contrary, demand for alcohol increased, and prices went up. Al Capone seized this opportunity. With Torrio's help, he started smuggling alcohol. Al Capone quickly realized he had a knack for this business. He set up a large network of smugglers and sellers. Business was so good that within a few years, Al Capone controlled most of Chicago's alcohol market. In 1925, Johnny Torrio decided to retire from the criminal world. Seeing Al Capone's talent, he handed over his entire operation to him. Thus, at the age of 26, Al Capone became the big boss of Chicago. Al Capone now controlled most of Chicago's illegal activities, from alcohol smuggling to gambling and prostitution. Everything was under his command. He built a vast criminal empire that grew larger every day. Interestingly, Al Capone had a brother named James Capone, who was a cop. James even worked for the Prohibition Enforcement Agency, but when he found out who his brother was, he changed his name to Richard Hart. However, Al Capone's success also made him many enemies. Rival gangs, seeing Al Capone taking over their business, started fighting back. This led to bloody gang wars. One of the most famous of these conflicts was the war between Al Capone and the Nardello gang. This war, which lasted several years, resulted in the deaths of dozens from both sides. Knowing he needed protection, Al Capone always traveled with armed bodyguards. Al Capone knew he could be attacked at any moment, so he decided to have a special car made. He ordered a 1928 Cadillac, but this wasn't an ordinary Cadillac. Al Capone had it made bulletproof. 3 tons of steel were used to build this car. Its windows were an inch thick, capable of stopping bullets. Even the car's body had holes for shooting with a machine gun. This car was so tough that Al Capone's enemies called it a moving tank. Al Capone never sat alone in this car. He always had a few of his bodyguards with him, and they'd put a few Tommy guns, which were pretty advanced back then, in the car. This car showed just how powerful yet paranoid Al Capone had become. Even though Al Capone was a criminal, he lived a very luxurious life. He loved expensive suits. They say each of his suits cost $500, which was a lot of money at the time. Nowadays, that would be around $10,000 per suit. Al Capone also loved jewelry. Diamond rings, gold watches, and expensive cufflinks were always with him. He even had a wooden cane with a pure gold handle. But Al Capone's lavish spending wasn't just for himself. He liked to give his friends expensive gifts too. Once, for a friend's birthday, he bought a Cadillac and covered it with roses. These actions made many people think Al Capone was generous. Even though Al Capone was a criminal, he tried to present a good image of himself. He knew that if ordinary people supported him, the police wouldn't easily catch him, so he started helping the poor. When the Great Depression hit in 1929, many people in Chicago were jobless and hungry. Al Capone, who had a lot of money, set up a charity kitchen. Every day, it served free food to thousands of people. This act earned him the nickname Robin Hood of Chicago. Al Capone also did other charitable acts. For example, he made donations to churches and hospitals. Once, when he found out a school couldn't provide milk to its students, he ordered that free milk be sent to that school every day. These actions made many ordinary people in Chicago like Al Capone. They thought he was a hero who stole from the rich and gave to the poor. Despite trying to show a good image, Al Capone was still a violent gangster. One of the darkest events in his life was the St. Valentine's Day Massacre in 1929. The story began when Bugs Moran, one of Al Capone's main rivals, started threatening Capone's territory. Not wanting to lose his power, Capone decided to eliminate Moran. On February 14th, Valentine's Day, Capone executed his plan. He sent a few of his hitmen, dressed as police officers, to a warehouse where he knew Moran's men would be. The hitmen entered the warehouse and started shooting. 7 of Moran's men were killed in the attack. This event was so horrific that it made headlines across America. People were terrified when they found out Capone was behind it. Even many who once liked Capone now hated him. Although everyone knew Capone was a criminal, the police couldn't arrest him. Why? Because Capone had bought off many cops, judges, and politicians. Whenever they tried to arrest him, someone would intervene, and Capone would be released. But in 1929, the US government came up with a new plan. They discovered that while Capone had a lot of money, he wasn't paying taxes. So, they decided to go after him for tax evasion. Elliot Ness, a special agent from the US Treasury Department, was put in charge of the case. He and a team of accountants began scrutinizing all of Capone's expenses and income. They found that Capone was making millions of dollars, but hadn't paid a single cent in taxes. In 1931, they finally brought Capone to trial.
Al Capone is through. Facing trial on income tax evasion, Al Capone finds an aroused government ready to put him behind bars.
He tried to bribe the judge and witnesses to get off the hook, but this time he failed. The court convicted Capone of tax evasion and sentenced him to 11 years in prison. Capone was first sent to Atlanta prison, but even there, he managed to buy off the guards and lived comfortably. When the authorities found out, they decided to move him to a tougher place, Alcatraz. Alcatraz was a maximum security prison on a small island in San Francisco Bay. It was known as the Rock because escaping from it was nearly impossible. Used to solving everything with money, Capone faced problems at Alcatraz. In Alcatraz, Capone had to behave like any other prisoner. No more fancy suits or delicious meals. He had to wear prison clothes and eat regular food. He even had to do hard labor like washing dishes and cleaning cells. While in prison, another problem caught up with Capone: syphilis. This sexually transmitted disease had afflicted him since his youth, but he had never taken it seriously. Now, it was destroying his brain. Gradually, Capone began to forget things. Sometimes he didn't know where he was or why he was there. His behavior became strange. Sometimes he thought he was still the big boss of Chicago and gave orders to the guards. In 1939, after 7.5 years, Capone was released from prison, but he was no longer the same Al Capone. His brain was so damaged that doctors said his mind was like that of a 12-year-old. He couldn't even do simple tasks anymore. Capone's family took him to his home in Florida. He spent the last few years of his life there. Sometimes he walked in the yard and talked to himself as if reliving his past, but he couldn't clearly remember what had happened. On January 25, 1947, at the age of 48, Al Capone had a stroke. They rushed him to the hospital, but it was too late. A few days later, on January 22nd, he passed away. Capone's death was big news. Newspapers headlined, "Al Capone, notorious gangster, dies." Many who remembered how powerful Capone had been couldn't believe he had died this way. They buried Capone's body in Chicago, the city he once ruled. The funeral was simple. Only family and a few old friends attended. It seemed all the former glory had vanished with Capone. Even though Al Capone died, his story didn't end. Today, many years later, a lot of people still know his name. He has become a symbol of the Prohibition era and American gangsters. Many movies and books have been made about Al Capone's life. Some view him as a hero who fought a corrupt system, while others see him as a ruthless criminal responsible for many deaths. But there are still some questions that nobody knows the answers to. For example, how much money did Al Capone really have? Or how did he rise so quickly in the underworld? Some say he was a genius, while others believe he was just lucky. One of the most famous rumors about Al Capone is whether he had a hidden treasure. This rumor persists, and some people are still searching for it. What's your opinion on Al Capone and the unanswered questions about him? Tell us in the comments, and if you liked the video, please like and subscribe.